going to do line division. We're going to start off with an example that's very primary. You should have done this before. And then I'm going to set up a couple more, but we're not going to take them all the way through. The divisor. That's not going to work. It's what you're dividing by. So here is the divisor. Spell it right this time. There we go. Okay? The dividend you're dividing into this. So this guy is your dividend. Okay? Your quotient is the answer. And your remainder is your leftover. And I'll show you a couple of different ways that you can write this. Good so far? So, the dividend, what you're dividing into, should be your answer times your divisor. So, your quotient times your divisor plus any remainder that you have, if you have a remainder. Okay? Good so far? You can interact with me, really. That's okay. You guys aren't usually this quiet. So, when you set it up, your dividend goes inside the little box, just like you did in elementary, middle school. And your divisor goes on the outside. Okay? So just to remind you how this works, it's 3 goes into 2. There's nothing there, so you leave it blank. 3 goes into 24. How many times? 8. 8 times. So 8 times 3 is 24. And do you remember what you did with these two? So we're going to subtract. So that's 0. And then you brought down the next number in line, which is 4. And how many times does 3 go into 4?
1.
1. Oh,
Once?
Once?
No.
Yeah. So 1 times 3 is 3, which when you subtract gives you 1. You're going to bring down the 5, and 3 goes into 15.
5.
5 times. Will you have a remainder?
No.
No. Because you don't have a remainder, you're done. So, the test is 815 times 3 should give you 2445. Okay, so whatever's on top is your answer. Your remainder, if there is one, goes over this divisor. Okay? Now, you might get it in different ways. If there is a negative here, that turns it into a fraction. So you have 976 times 1 over 5. I will correct you on video so everyone can hear that you're talking. So then when you're multiplying by a fraction, remember it's the number times the top divided by the bottom. So it's 976 divided by 5 because it's times 1 and then divide by 5. Sorry, I keep standing in front of you. And then that's going to get set up the very same way. So this, that one, and this one all mean all the same way. So if you have it as a fraction, the 4 goes on the outside and the 2089 goes on the inside. So let's do this one all the way through. 4 goes into 2. It doesn't. 4 goes into 20 how many times?
5.
So 4 times 5 gives you 20.
Cross that
Remember,
out.
you subtract, so that goes to 0.
2.
Bring down the 8, which goes in
2.
2 times. 2 times 4 is
8.
8. That's another 0.
1 there.
Bring down your next term.
2.
Goes in another 2 times, but this time
You got a remainder.
you have a leftover, which is a remainder. So you should put it as 1/4. So it's 522 with a 4th left over. So 1 is the remainder. When you get into some of the other ones, it will look a little bit different. So I'll show you your options. Okay?
Wait, where did 8 come from?
2 times 4 gives you 8. Subtract. That goes to 0. Bring down your 9. 4 goes into 9 twice. So 2 times 4 is 8. Subtract. 9 minus 8 gives you 1. Because gonna be the same way. So when we do the next one, we're gonna do it exactly the same way. Make sure that you give yourself room to write above your division box. Okay, divisor, dividend. Okay, so x minus 3. This is a sneaky way of factoring. So x minus 3. I got plenty of room above my box. I'm going to copy in what we're dividing into. If it's missing any letters, I put in a term and it's 0. So it's 3, 2, 1, and then 0. It has to go in order, so if you're missing anything. Now you're going to do this the same way. I'm going to try to color coordinate it. So the first one we'll do in red. Note, very first note, only match the leading terms. Okay, that's super important. So as we move down and start pulling the numbers down, only match the leading terms. Don't worry about anything else, only the leading terms. You need each one to go to 0, the very first thing. After that, it'll take care of itself. Okay, so leading term on this one is x. So the first thing in each line is going to match with this x. So what can I multiply to x to get a 4x to the third? What's the first thing you know you're going to multiply by? I need a 4, right? So 4 times x will give me 4x. How many more do I need to get 3? Squared, or 2. Okay? Now, this gets multiplied to both terms, the x and the negative 3. So it's like distribution. So 4x squared times x gives you your 4x to the third. Then take your 4x squared and multiply it to your negative 3. What is 4x squared times negative 3? So negative 12x squared. Okay? Next, now we have to subtract. So this is minus, and that becomes a plus. Subtraction is a sign change. If you change your sign, then you've got everything lined up the way it is. So what it's going to look like is 4x to the third minus 4x to the third gives you what? 0, so it's going to cancel. Then negative 9x squared minus a negative. When you subtract a negative, what are you really doing? You're adding it. So negative 9, that becomes a plus. 12x squared is, so that's 3x squared. Now we're going to pull down the negative 10x. So every time if you have 2 terms here, you're going to pull down to have 2 terms in each line. Now what's your leading term? Now the new one is your 3x squared. So now you're going to look at it and go, okay, 3x squared, what do I need to multiply to x? Okay, so the first thing we need is a 3. Since this one's positive, make it plus 3. And then how do I get an x squared from an x? Just x, good. Okay? So now, I'm going to multiply this 3x to the x to give me, okay, 3x squared. Then 3x times the negative 3, kind of 9? Negative 9. Negative 9x. Move this up a little bit. Okay. Now you have to subtract. So when I subtract 3x squared minus, I always circle them so I know I changed them in case I have to go back and double check. That's going to cancel. When I subtract a negative, it becomes a positive. So what is negative 10x plus 9x? Negative x. What's my next step?
Bring down the
Pull that 2 down, so it becomes a negative 2. Okay? Now remember, leading terms only. So how do I match x with negative x? I'm running out of colors. Am I done purple? So negative 1. So negative 1 times x gives me a negative x. And negative 1 times negative 3 gives me plus 3. Notice I'm only worried about those leading terms. So when I subtract, that's a sign change for both of them. So what is negative x plus x?
Cancels.
Okay. What is negative 2 minus 3? Okay. And this is your leftover. This is the remainder. Okay, now when you write it, here is your answer. 4x squared plus 3x minus 1, and this is your remainder, so it's plus a negative 5 over x minus 3. Yeah, when that does that.
So you change it from positive to
Where?
negative.
Oh, down here? Yes, because I'm subtracting. So if you change the signs and when you do the subtraction, if you just change the signs, then you just have to combine like terms. That'll help you remember to do it. Okay, now you got a couple of different ways to write it. One of them is like this with the fraction. And sometimes you will see it like this. 4x squared plus 3x minus 1 are negative 5. If you don't pull in, that's okay. Okay? Good so far. Now, you're thinking to yourself, why in the world would I ever want to do this? You're going to type. It's another way to factor when you have larger polynomials. So it's a good way to get those things factored out. It actually tells you something. So if you look at the bottom, your remainder theorem says if it's divided by, if you have a function just like we did our 4x to the third polynomial, and it's divided by an x minus 3, then the remainder is the same as if you plugged in the 3. Okay? So here's how you do that. All I need to do is take my original and plug in the 3. That's considered like you're finding a 0. So you're wanting to know, is it a 0? So you can plug it in. Sometimes plugging it in is way harder than doing the long division. So just heads up, do the long division. But I'm going to plug in. I had to stick it there so I could see it. All right, so it's not the same on yours. So all I did was filled it in to my equation. So now you're going to simplify. Do all of your exponents first. What's 3 to the third? 3 times 3 times 3.
27.
Minus 9 times 3 times 3. 3 times 3. Nobody knows 3 times 3?
Oh, no.
And then you can do 10 times 3 for 30 minus 2. Okay? 4 times 27, I'll give you that one, that's 108. Minus 81, minus 30, oops. Whoopsie. Minus 2. If you put that all in your calculator, any guesses what you think you might get? What was our remainder?
I get 5.
Negative 5. You get a negative 5. So all of that equals a negative 5. So dividing by this is the same as if you set it equal to 0 to get 3, because 3 minus 3 equals 0, and plugging it back into the equation. Now, if you plug it all back into the equation and you get 0, then that's going to be where it crosses the x-axis, and that's an actual 0 of your function. So that's one of the ways that we use it. So if x minus 3 is a factor at number 4, we would have to say f of 3 is equal to negative 5. So since f of 3 is not equal to 0, it's not a factor. Say that one more time. Like yours, I'm glad. The 3 comes from the divisor, the x minus 3. So you know when we go through and we do all of them, we always set it equal to 0, or we change the sign. So the x minus 3 pulled the 3 out. Cool? Okay, so for practice, I'm going to steal yours, because I can't remember what I did. Okay, so for practice, what you're going to do is you're going to do 4 long divisions. 2 of them are set up and 2 of them are not, so you'll have to set them up. Even though you're dividing by a 3 term on number 4, only worry about the first coefficients, or leading terms, sorry, the leading terms. 5 and 6 is review with end behavior. Check back in your notes for that, and then check all of the ones that are true. That looks familiar. I think Mrs. Smith class already had that. If it has a star next to it, like 2, 3, and 4, you should get a remainder just like we did on the notes. Cool? You've got 4 line division, and we're done.